My name is Tanya. I am excited to be here with you on the second part of our panel as part of the Civil Rights and Social Justice section and our Perfecting Democracy program. We now are going to shift into a community conversation with our partners that have been working on the ground. And again, what we want to reiterate is that this is why we come here, because we recognize that the American Bar Association and it's going to be in different places, but you all on the ground are the ones doing this work, and you all are going to stay here when we leave. And so we want to engage in the conversation with you about what it is that you need, what are the things that are impacting the local issues or the local people on the ground. And so before we do that, and before I give the introductions of everybody who's on our panel, I'm going to play a welcome remarks from the Supreme Court Justice, the Honorable Kyra Bolden, who was supposed to be here with us today. Unfortunately, had a last-minute cancellation, but she did send this video, so I'm going to play this first, and then we're going to come back here and introduce our panelists. So.
Hi, Black Women's Roundtable. It's Michigan Supreme Court Justice Kyra Harris Bolden. Now I'm going to tell you a couple things about the nonpartisan section of your ballot. A lot of people miss the nonpartisan section, which is where your judges will be. Now, if you hit straight ticket, that will gather all of your partisan people, but you have to go to the nonpartisan section of your ballot and bubble in your judges, your mayor, your school board races. You don't want to miss those. Your judges are responsible for so much in our society. It determines what rights people have. Our judges determine, the outcome of termination of parental rights, whether or not someone gets a new trial, the way someone's sentenced. We determine tax issues. Everything that touches your life, judges will also interpret the law whenever there's a dispute. And, one thing that people say to me is, we want to see more people in positions of power that look like us, right? But in order to do that, the most direct path is to vote. You have to exercise your right to vote. Now, I know some of you are saying, how do I know that, this is the right person? I really encourage you, when you get your ballot, to Google the individuals on your ballot. I know that there is incredible apprehension to choosing the wrong person, right? And so, just open up your laptop or open your phone, and when you see the names on your ballot, you can get a sample ballot off of the Secretary of State's website. Google those individuals and see who you might want to vote for. Contact those individuals. Usually on their websites, you have the ability to contact that person and ask them questions. So it is incredibly important if you wish to see more Black people, more people of color, more working moms, more new moms, more diversity in our judicial system. It is critical that you vote. So thank you so much, and I appreciate your time.
All right, well, so I wanted to now begin our conversation, and the reason that we wanted to have Justice Bolden kind of give at least the video remarks is because we recognize that there's a lot of issues that are impacting and affecting communities on the ground, and everybody's not looking at the top of the ticket, and we're not here about figuring out who it is you're voting for. We're here about making sure you're engaged. And so what engages people is different in every community. And what Justice Bolden was talking about was the fact that there's, the judges here, they're elected. Not every place is like that, but here they're elected. And so you have to have a conversation, you have to, educate yourselves about, how it is, who you're going to be, and how you're going to engage in the process, but also understand how judges do affect your everyday life. And so it becomes personal. And that's why we want to have that conversation. So without further ado, I want to introduce our community panel. These are all friends, people that are doing the hard work on the ground. As I said, when we leave and go back to our respective areas, they're still here, and they're doing that hard work. So first, I'm going to go from left to right, introduce our panelists. I'm going to introduce Kermit Williams, who is the co-director of Oakland Forward. And I'm going to give just introductions because I recognize we're running short on time. They have wonderful bios that you should go back and read at a later time. But I want to make sure that I give the introductions. Just know that Kermit has been an advocate, a serious advocate on the ground, making sure, and an organizer, as you heard him, bringing y'all back in here to make sure that we have this conversation, and somebody who I respect and really appreciate, who's taken the time out to be here with us here today. So welcome, Kermit Williams. Next, welcome Tameka Ramsey, another sister that I have known for years, who was the head of the Michigan Coalition of Black Civic Participation, also with the Michigan Black Women's Roundtable. She holds a whole lot of different hats, that not all of them that I can mention, but again, I want to welcome her, since you know she has been helping to organize this conversation here today as well. So thank you, Tameka, for being here. And then to my right, I want to welcome Branden Snyder, who is the Executive Director of Detroit Action. And once again, it's funny, we meet in different circles. Branden has been doing magnificent work and organizing as well on the ground and making sure, particularly in this area, someone that I've known in different capacities, even as a funder. And so I was really excited to be able to come here to Detroit and to be able to bring all these people together. So with that, what I want to do is I'm going to sit down because y'all need to keep hearing from me. I want to hear from you all. I'm going to give you this opening question, and I think what I'll do is just start from left to right, the way that I introduced you all. But the opening question really is about what I just was saying. So, I want to know how each of you have been working throughout your respective organizations and your communities about the issues that are criminal justice, or the things that are impacting your community. And to talk about the intersection that this has also about within voter engagement, and how it is that this is so important to the protection of our democracy. So let me start with that, and I'm going to go sit down.
Microphone is on. All right. First, let me thank Ms. Tanya and the American Bar Association. Let's give them a hand for putting this together. This is historic. That's happening not only in the building. A lot of times we hear from lawyers, but lawyers don't get to hear from us. So I appreciate y'all being here and being at the beautiful Wayne State campus along with Dr. Hammer and all the other people that are here. I am co-director of Oakland Forward along with Autumn Butler. I say it all the time, nothing great in America happens without a black woman. And so, she knows. One of the things that we just did last Sunday, along with Black Voters Matter and Growing Real Alternatives Everywhere, along with the Michigan Coalition for Black Civic Participation, our On Wall Street, and a host of other groups, we had a warrant clinic in the city of Pontiac. I'm from Pontiac, Michigan, the center of the universe, 45 minutes down the street, so make sure y'all come on out and support Pontiac. But we waived 130 warrants from people. This is our third warrant clinic, so all in total, we've done about 500 people just in Pontiac. And then Shanita's been doing it with our own Wall Street, and Norman have been doing it down here, and they had like 1,000 people show up to waive warrants. It's important that we remove the barriers for people to be able to vote when they are criminally impacted or subject to be criminally impacted, because those are the people who need to vote the most but feel like their vote counts the least. And so we started off doing this work 20 years ago. I had to ride the 53 bus down here in Detroit. They've changed that now, and catch it at the fairgrounds. But we started on buses registering people to vote way back then, and we registered a whole lot of people. But people get registered, they get invited out to vote, and it's very transactional. We have people that are dealing with what's called oppression fatigue. They have to think about how they're going to eat, how they're going to live, how they're going to take care of their family before they can vote. And a lot of times, the elected officials don't talk to them about those issues. You just heard from Kyra Bolden. She was on the ballot 2 years ago and lost. The reason that she's a judge today is because she got appointed by the governor. She's back on the ballot again this November, and if things don't change, she won't be the only black justice sitting at top of the court. And that makes a difference, because there is an issue of race that we have to tackle when we start talking about elections and voting. And we need to not only deal with that, but we need to acknowledge that. People are really hurting right now, and we don't always take the opportunity to see them for more than their vote. And so when you don't have real conversations with people, people don't hear that. I'll say this last point, because I know Tameka and Branden do this every day also, so I'll let them talk. But I will say this part. We discovered during the pandemic that mutual aid was just as important as any of the things that we were talking about with democracy. Making sure people knew how much we cared first before they cared what we talked about was first and foremost. So we passed out masks. Tameka always brings laundry detergent and other stuff, toilet paper. Those simple things can actually impact a life. And when we talk about democracy and scaling it, people need to know that we care about their humanity before we care about what they do at the ballot.
Hi, my name is Ramsey, and I am the founding director of the Michigan Coalition on Black Civic Participation. I'm also from the center of the University of Pontiac, Michigan. How the criminal justice system and democracy has impacted me. I was in the 4th or 5th grade when I found out that my father had to do a 6-year prison stint in the UP because he had children and was trying to take care of us and was selling drugs. And somebody came and robbed him and beat up his fiance. And my father went and beat the man up and almost killed him and went to prison for that. At the time, he was working at General Motors also. I was like, you know, everybody always has a side hustle. Unfortunately for black men, sometimes that is selling drugs in addition to their job. And my father did his time. He did 6 years. He started in Ionia, and then they moved him up north, an hour from the bridge. And his fiance was a white woman. My stepmother was a white woman, and her family lived there. So it wasn't as hard on us to see my dad. As we got older, he stopped us from coming up there because he didn't like how we got pat down as young women. And so for the last 2 years of his time, I could not see my dad. And when he came home, he had a wife, he had a community, but he also had a union. And that union, the United Auto Workers, fought for my dad. And after 3 years of working at Hardee's, my dad got his job back at GM. So when we talk about the criminal justice system and we talk about democracy, when we talk about social justice, I've lived it. Like in my heart, I've lived it. I know what that experience looks like. My dad, he walked to Hardee's every day, and he says, this is my situation now, this is not my forever, we have to work and plan. And one of the things that was really important to him was voting and education. He was like, he had a 6th grade education, and he said education is going to be freedom for my daughters. In the summertime, you know, when GM had those let your kids work here, he would not get me and my sister in because he said, I don't want this to be your plan. And so I understand the importance of voting because my dad said, we need to elect people. We need to have people in office who understand what it means when their family comes home from prison and want a better life for their families. He said it was hard. Those 3 years were hard. And he said, I will not sell drugs again because I don't want to be taken away from my family. But there was not a lot of options for returning citizens at that time. And this was in like the late 80s. There were just no resources like they are today. And we blame people for reoffending when all they're trying to do is to come out and take care of their family, to be a part of their community. And I hear people all the time complaining about the judges and how they don't treat them fair and how the sentencing is harsh. And I go to them and say, do you know you put them in their job? Mm-hmm. And people don't understand that we elect our judges. Mm-hmm. They don't look at the back of the ballot. They don't understand it. But if you're someone like me, whose childhood was impacted by this, as an adult, you take it seriously. You take educating people seriously. Because even now, I have a 28-year-old son who was impacted by the criminal justice system. And it broke me to my heart that we were there, but it scared the hell out of me because we had to go to the courts in Rochester. And we were sitting in the courts, and my son has locks, he's 6'3". I mean, on a good day, he looked like he gonna beat you up and rob you. And that's when he looking friendly, right? People are scared of him. And all I could think of as a mom was, how can I wipe him down? How can I make his hair shorter? How can I put him on a suit and make him presentable? Because as he was not gonna get a fair trial or anything. And he didn't. And we sat there in the courtroom and we saw white person after, and they looked so young, and some of them were like, I was on meth, I robbed banks, and they looked like they just came out of a job interview. And I knew that my son had only done, he stole something from a store, it was less than $100. And I knew that it was going to be harder for him than it would be for some of those other people. And so I fight because my son is not the only son that I've seen go through this. And I don't want, and I have resources. When that happened with my son, every important person that I call, I knew they got a call from me. They helped us through the situation. But everybody doesn't have that Rolodex. Everybody doesn't have those relationships, and we shouldn't have to. It is our responsibility to be the ones to advocate and fight for those who cannot. Every single time. And I'm talking to black people specifically, other races do it all the time. I have a friend who's from Puerto Rico. In Puerto Rico, you cannot vote for president, but you have Puerto Ricans in the States who are voting for president to help the people in Puerto Rico. We, as black people, need to start educating our community on the importance of voting for the clerk, for the judges, for criminal justice reform. Because if we're not doing it, then they're not doing it because they don't know that they can. They hear these horrible stories about in Texas when people, the mother who accidentally voted thinking she could and then went to prison. They hear those stories, and even though it doesn't apply in this state, they think it does, and they don't want to take those chances. And so it is our responsibility, and it's hard, and it's stressful. Sometimes we don't win, but if we stop, then we will never have the opportunity to win, and people deserve a second chance. My dad deserves a second chance. My son deserves a second chance. Mr. Kelly deserves a second chance. Anybody who has been through the criminal justice system deserves a second chance. And sometimes it is those who have never had to be in the courtroom in front of a judge that will help them get that second chance.
So what up, though? My name is Branden Snyder. I'm the executive director at Detroit Action. Actually, outgoing executive director. I got into this work as a community organizer almost 20 years ago while I was at the University of Michigan as an undergrad. Go Blue. I was a first generation college student. My parents, were in and out of the criminal legal system, dealing with, issues of being impacted by the war on drugs and substance abuse, as well as rock. I hear it clicking on and off, so I'm gonna try to make this work. So, my parents were robbing Peter to pay Paul, and so they gave me this idea, this American dream of, working hard, pulling myself up on bootstraps, working really hard, going to college, and I too can live this American dream. And so, I did that, and I thought that was the pathway out of Detroit and a pathway towards this life of prosperity. But when I got to U of M, the violence and stuff and whatnot that my parents knew really was just flipped and manifested into patriarchal, classist, violence that many of our communities face. and is often looked at as what its promise is. So for me, I was isolated, and was lashed out and was doing bad. So I got involved in organizing and community work. I got involved in my fraternity, got involved into a number of things as an opportunity to build community, but also build myself. And this moment of being an organizer really was shaped and manifested from two things. One, from getting involved in student leadership. Three things actually. Two, I took a class towards the end of my college career with a professor of mine who was taking young folks from Ann Arbor to Detroit to work in soup kitchens and homeless shelters, building a community of folks who were organizing people around like what did they want to see and what did they want to work on. And in 07 and 08, many of the people that we were meeting at those homeless shelters and soup kitchens weren't your quote unquote face of homelessness. These were people who had just lost their home to the mortgage foreclosure crisis and were going to the soup kitchens in the morning to get breakfast for their kids or for themselves and then go to work. And so for me, that shaped and reshaped, my understanding of what does it mean to have access to opportunity and like what are the barriers that are being placed in front of folks to be able to see the opportunity that we all, strive for and think about. And the third thing that happened to me that, shaped my perspective and has made me do this as my career, my life's work, is towards the end of my college career in Michigan, I actually got arrested and I was locked up in the Washington County Jail. And I thought with this legal situation, I was shamed, I was embarrassed, and I thought the smartest thing I could do to outmaneuver the system and not let my parents know is that I could hide and wait it out in the county jail. And like Law and Order, it'll be done in a couple of days. But that's just not how the legal system works. And so after a couple of weeks, my college professor, my friends and folks ended up coming looking for me and were able to help me resolve my legal situation. But during that time, I was meeting folks who looked like me, who looked like some of y'all, who who were black men, were 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, and they were going to prison in one of the wealthiest counties in the country. The home to 2 colleges, 2 universities, a number of Fortune 500 universities. They were trapped in the shadows of that community and isolated in poverty. Very much similar to me in the experience that I lived 45 minutes down the road, but they looked at me as if I had 3 heads because I was a black man at Michigan who wasn't on the football team or the basketball team. And so once I got my legal situation resolved, my mentor called me into his office, wanted to talk to me about what it was that I was doing and what it was the type of life that I wanted to live and like really just what the hell was going on. And he challenged me with this story that we use in organizing called the parable of the babies in the river. With this idea that, all these things that I saw, all these thoughts I had about criminal justice and opportunity and access and like who is worthy of the American dream, replace that and imagine that we're in a picturesque, idyllic village. Green grass, blue skies, ice-capped mountains, sort of like The Sound of Music, one of those type of villages. And as you're thinking and you're getting this mental picture of the village, you're walking closer and closer into the streaming river that's in the middle of the village. Picturesque blue water, and you see a baby. But not just one baby streaming down that river. You see multiple babies streaming down the river from the ice-capped mountains. And so many of the responses that the society or that village may have to those babies streaming down the river is, well, maybe we should have towels waiting for those babies once they get out the river. Or maybe we should advocate and tell people why babies in the river is bad. Or maybe we should do something about having a fence around the river. But nobody actually stops and says, well, how the hell did the babies end up in the river in the first place? So organizing for me has been an opportunity to do that to challenge how those babies ended up in the river, but also to hold accountable those people who are putting babies in the river, and work with, carry this metaphor a little farther, those babies, the families of those babies, and the people who live around that village to actually create something that they want to see for themselves. And so when I think about organizing, I think of the work that we do at Detroit Action, it's bigger and bolder than just an election cycle. It's bigger and bolder than just telling a person to vote for a candidate. It's bigger and bolder than just passing a policy. It's about how do we actually create agency and power amongst working class folks, like my parents, like folks that you and I may know, to actually say that they're leaders in their communities, and they can actually shape the destiny of those neighborhoods. And so for that, it means that we actually have to understand that elections are a tool. They're an opportunity for us to cast, like a yoke vote on a candidate. Put a 5-star review for a person, or maybe a 0-star review for a person based on that service that they've done for our communities. But it's an opportunity for our people, many of whom are locked in the shadows, to be able to have the type of agency that they deserve. And organizing that we do, whether it's from our housing work, winning rights to counsel, where we are able to have free lawyers for landlord-tenant disputes, or winning justice for folks who've been under property tax foreclosure, making sure that that there's reform on the ordinance around how property taxes are done. Those things happen not just because we want to be involved in policy, or about the personalities of a candidate. Is that because we want to make sure that working people have agency in our communities, regardless of their backgrounds. And we do that all year round through the election, making sure that our stories are told and that we're engaged through all parts of the process.
So I'm looking at the time, and I want to be respectful of everybody, but what I'd like to do at least is to get one question in and then open it up for questions from the audience. And I appreciate everyone giving their stories as to why and talking about the criminal. And I'm going to just show my stripes here. I come to saying the criminal legal system because I don't feel it's just. With regard to how it is that I appreciate the stories, I'd like to know, since we do have not only people from the community here, but also attorneys from both the American Bar Association and the National Bar Association. What do you want from us? What do you need? As I said, you're still here, and you're going to be doing this work on the ground, so what do you need for us to do? No, just go back.
Start right here. I think that there's a lot that the partnership between organizers, community organizers, and attorneys can accomplish. Like, we see that when we think about the work that our friends at Street Democracy does with Street Court. That's a project that was started, with organizers and attorneys like Jay-ish and the audience, actually saying, like, how can we do the justice system differently? How can we make sure that we aren't punishing people just because they're poor? I think those are like the types of things that we want to actually be able to see and be able to have when we think about what is it that bar associations, attorneys, movement lawyers can do. And it's important to also, when we do that, also people to understand that we don't, as an organizer or as an attorney, we don't have to do everything. That there are lanes for us, and that the best partnerships and the best products come from that type of partnership where we understand our lanes and we're working on our strengths and we're building the type of power, taking on the landscapes that we're good at, and that we're able to move things, for the benefit of the community.
Thank you for that, Branden. I would also like to give Jay a shout out because when my son was going through his legal problems, Street Democracy walked us through the process. And I agree with Branden wholeheartedly. People in our communities, they don't know. They are ignorant to a lot of things. And because of that, things happen to us. And having partnerships with attorneys and organizations like this really do help us, because when we're knocking doors, when Kermit said mutual aid, if somebody is going through a legal system and we're talking about vote, they care less about an election. They're trying to stay out of jail. They are trying to take care of their families, and they're asking and need something that maybe my organization can't provide. But having a relationship with an organization and being able to hand those people off and let them know this is who you're going to be talking to, I think is the most beneficial thing that could happen for us.
Yeah, ditto to everything Branden and Tameka said. I think for me, the one thing that can really be done is more conversations like this. But the second part is lawyers have access to rooms that regular people don't. And when you get in those rooms, making sure that you're advocating for the least of these in these situations. I think a lot of times we get an education, we get a privilege, and then we stay at that level. Everything is really homogeneous, and now people don't go to church. So most of the time people hang around people that they are most alike, right? Church used to be the place where people on every level would get together with a solid mission of bettering the world, bettering humanity. Well, we need y'all to do that right now. A lot of the things that we put on the ballot as far as millages and other things, we need lawyers in order to help craft that legislation. Most people don't have access to that. And so I know if you talk to Marcus Kelly or talk to somebody else that's in this room, they have a policy. This brother's trying to get slavery out of the Michigan Constitution right now, right? But there's no dollars to help that. There's no money to go into that. I mean, everybody agrees with it, says, oh yeah, we should do that, right? But they're not giving him $3.8 billion to do a ballot initiative to get slavery out of the ballot. But if he had a group of lawyers, maybe a bar association, that could help him do that work, then we could get stuff done. I think it's really simple because y'all are an activating tool that should be used by regular people so we can organize them around the great stuff that y'all are doing.
Those are really powerful statements, and I appreciate you challenging everybody here as to what needs to be done. So I want to open this up to any questions from the audience, but then also give you all the opportunity to give some closing remarks, because we've only heard a tidbit of what it is that you all are about and what you're doing, and I really treasure and appreciate y'all being here, and I just want to hear more. I want others to hear more, but I also want to make sure that we open it up. So are there any questions from the audience? And what I'll do is I'll come out around and see. Questions? Yep.
Kermit made an excellent point about, lawyers get to be in rooms that you don't. But I like to, when I'm in those spaces, like to make sure they're including the community. But are there spaces that you haven't been able to get into? And then I have a second question, which is, Branden made a good point about advocates really having an effective space, and is there a way to create advocacy work for people in your organization that's going to be effective pre-election and post-election?
Yeah, two things. Shameless plug, of course, you can always donate to Oakland Forward or Detroit Action or the Michigan Coalition for Civic Participation, because I know lawyers can only give a certain amount to candidates, but y'all can give almost unlimited money to us. Look at it as a Christmas present or a Kwanzaa present, however you want to do it. But there are spaces, especially when we're working with local courts, like on the Warren Clinic. One of the barriers that we have is we have some phenomenal judges in the city in which I live, Pontiac, but a lot of the people who have warrants are from surrounding areas, because I live in the poorest city in the third richest county in the world. So they just wait for us to go outside the city limits, and then they tag these people, take them to jail. And so we need lawyers to be able to go to West Bloomfield and do some of these other things. And so I know that everybody's always asking y'all for pro bono stuff. I get it, right? And I know that you do the hours that you need to do. But as a collective, when you put that power together and say, listen, we're going to have a legal clinic, but it's going to be solely to help these people that couldn't get help otherwise. Those are the kind of things that will really make it transformational. And the bigger problem is we always get a sense of urgency and agency around election time. We suffer 365. There's a statistic out that says, as a black man, my life has not improved since 1970 in any statistical category. So if you want to help, we can help on everything, even from literacy on up. So I'll stop right there, but I just want to really prick your thinking on the fact that there's work to be done every day.
I would just say that both Kermit and Branden do a lot of black men organizing in the state. And when they have these events, Kermit does a brothers brunch. One of the issues is child support. One of the issues is warrants and license fees. These men come because they want the help and assistance and they don't have the resources or don't know where to go. So being able to be tapped into those type of meetings and coming and helping, once we can remove the barriers that stop them, right? Because they're scared, then we can talk about elections, then we can talk about all the other things. But right now, focusing on their quality of life is one of the things that we do, and courts is one of the biggest barriers that they have.
There is an opportunity for attorneys to really be engaged in our community in the democracy space by just being good partners and being good stewards of their intellectual resources as well as the resources they have. And that means in many cases not gatekeeping, gatekeeping some of these rooms that should be open to others. So I think that that's one place. I think that that's really important when we think about our movements, is that there are moments in which we actually want the expertise of those who have, the blood, sweat, and tears of, passing the bar, going to law school, taking the LSAT, going to undergrad, whatnot. And then there's moments where we actually need you to take a step back and let somebody who is going through that experience be on the front lines and tell the story and tell the experience. And so being able to balance the two of when we need the expertise and we actually need the anecdotal experience to be elevated. So that's first and foremost. And then I think to the other part of the question about year-round civic engagement, we just think that is the theme, and that elections are a comma in the sentence of civic engagement. It's not the period. It's a comma. And so much of our how we speak about elections and how we speak about democracy broadly is about coronations. Where we're trying to coronate somebody to be in this role versus this is a participatory process. Actively engaged in participatory sovereignty. So our work has to really think about flipping that paradigm to where we're talking about a shared solidarity and a shared democracy that's rooted in that and rooted in what is it that we want year round to accomplish it. So the housing work that we do or the jobs work that we do isn't about trying to elevate a candidate. It's about how do we actually win something that can say that democracy is worth a damn.
Are there any more questions for the panel? I'm doing my best over that I can right now. Walking up and down, maybe.
First, I just want to say thank you to Kermit, Tameka, and Branden for just sharing your story and your testimony, and for the great work that you do. Just thinking in a broader picture, what are some of the ways we can continue this conversation after today? Because it's a lot of times we have things, we talk about it, but how can we keep this momentum going forward? And just thinking about the fact that we are here at Wayne State and there's so many phenomenal students, professors, organizations, but maybe how can we support the work that you're doing to elevate your voices?
Thank you for that. I am going to go back to what Branden said and say partnerships. They are organizing men all the time. Having small Zoom meetings with attorneys where people can have conversations. Just being in the room, not even telling people who you are or what you do, there will be when Tanya said the ABA was coming, I was like, we're about to be talking about child support, we're gonna be talking about, like, there are a plethora of things that people are impacted with the criminal justice system. And being aware of that, but just having those conversations, where it's in small groups, on Zoom, going to where these meetings are happening. I think continuing that relationship is one of the most important things for me. Yeah, and I'm here to
Yeah, no, everything Tameka said about partnerships is totally correct. But I think that one of the things that we're at the precipice of in this particular election cycle, the comma, as Branden said, is the fact that black people, especially black men, are being scapegoated into either the rise or the fall of the American democracy. And I think that everybody who leaves this room needs to be really talking about the reality. Mr. Willard talked about how black men vote the least, but we've been voting historically, and we vote at a 80% clip for one particular party. And the state of Michigan is going to be won or lost by how we turn out and vote. I think people need to hear your story and talk about democracy. I think that the civil rights movement in particular, my first foray into anything political was marching with Dick Gregory down my street because one of our local parks had been drug infested and somebody got shot. To have those national figures come into a place like Pontiac made a difference. You carry more weight and more stature than you know, but you have to use that voice and really advocate. We shouldn't be setting up these meetings. These meetings should happen all the time because we need to have a real flourishing of democracy. We need to have a Socrates moment as a community that we currently don't have. The conversation that we have right now is very low level. It's very low level. It's the baseline of everything that we stand against. But the things that we really need to talk about and debate, I think the lawyers have a huge opportunity to really reclaim American democracy in a way that makes voting palatable. People don't want to be part of this system right now. And so they're not voting between two candidates, they're voting between the couch and the ballot right now. And we need to be able to engage them, and I think that you are much more eloquent than I am, and you can elevate not only the consciousness of America, but taking that stand that we had during the civil rights movement that I think some lawyers are advocating. And I know I'm preaching to the choir because y'all here the day before Mother's Day listening to me talk, but I think that talking to your colleagues, talking to those people that you have a water cooler conversation with about what they can do to elevate democracy will be really helpful as we go forward.
I'm going to take one more question and let Branden respond if you have anything, and I'll take our last question.
Yeah, I'll be super quick. So, you know, Thoreau talks about this idea of like mediating institutions, you know, like when he came to America, saw all these like, you know, it's all democracy, like, oh, America, y'all are doing democracy really great. Y'all have all these things. And like the, you know, whatever we believe about that. But I think like the idea of like, how do we actually like rebuild and emphasize institutions is super important. Like people should be a part of their church, be a part of your synagogue, be a part of your mosque, be a part of an organization and a block club. Because those are the things that's actually gonna like withstand and hold up democracy and actually be able to be a shield for many of our community members against like the oncoming onslaught that people are gonna be facing, you know, and are facing right now. You know, because of like the changes in our economy, changes in politics, whatever. So, you know, I think the question of like how people can get involved, like join an organization, like, knock a door, like come to a conversation about mutual aid, like show up and be involved and be in relationship with folks, because you know it sounds cliche, but what we find in the movement is to be true is that like we take care of us. Like we protect us, and so like that is the way that we're actually going to be able to, you know, build a real and actual reflective democracy. Is if we actually build it in the image of our communities.
as I'm thinking about those that are returning from legal slavery, which is jails and prisons, I think of the mental illnesses they suffer as a result of post-incarceration syndrome. I think one ask would be how could you highlight that and start protecting those people, people like us that suffer from that particular mental illness, and those that don't even know that they have it, that we say they have, that it's just institutionalized. And I think about that because we talk about, I heard a young lady here say something about domestic violence. That is a high rise as a result of post-incarceration syndrome too. You know, we got recidivism, drug and alcohol abuse, things like that. Those are serious issues that we need to address that is not being talked about or discussed that plagues our communities. And one of the things that keep us disenfranchised, right? Then, you know, being somebody from Pontiac, Bolden County, one of the richest counties, but impoverished in Pontiac, we only have 2 people in our conviction integrity unit. So we have a lot of people waiting to have their cases looked at and re-looked at because it was victimized by Mark Ferguson, the ex-detective, who I was a victim of, and I was going to be a victim as well. And there's people getting their cases looked at for 5 or 6 years now sitting there. And so when I went up there and talked to them, there's only 2 people in that unit. They don't have the funding. We have a lot of funding to incarcerate us, but no funding to get justice for us. So I'm thinking, you know, maybe that's another issue that we probably look at. But those are the things I would actually look at.
I think that would be a good question.
Yeah, I'm gonna, no. Okay, well, what I'll do is this. I appreciate that question, and you're right. I mean, there's so many things, and that's why we're having this conversation, and I appreciate you bringing that up. I know that a lot of some of our EDA colleagues are having to leave. Obviously, it's Mother's Day weekend. I'm a mother too, so I'm leaving. But I wanted to make sure that I hear you. I appreciate it. You're right. There are, as I recognized earlier, that there are so many rights that people lose at the moment of incarceration. There are rights that people don't realize that they still have actually when they're initially incarcerated and not when they're initially put in jail, but they haven't been convicted yet. So many people don't realize they can still vote, but there's that as well. But even as you're talking about coming out, the mental health awareness, which we're needing to deal with across the board, but it definitely for those that are firmly incarcerated is something that I think that we can all take back, and that we can also have actually an action plan, develop strategies by which we can move things forward. So because we don't want to just come out of this talking and saying and listing all the problems, we actually want to come out of this with something actionable, right, for what it is that we can do. That's what the Civil Rights and Social Justice section is about. So with that, I would like to, before I want to first thank each and every one of you for being here today. I don't know if you want to take a moment to give any closing remarks. Yeah. I do, again, appreciate you being here on this weekend, on a Saturday afternoon. I think this is a very important conversation. Thank you again to the Civil Rights and Social Justice section. Thank you to all of our partners, all of you all as well. Thank you to the National Bar Association. I also want to highlight and thank all the staff from the ABA. Some had to also leave to catch their flights. I also want to uplift a colleague, Dr. Cynthia Swan, who was supposed to be here today, who was also a member of the Council of the Civil Rights and Social Justice section. And unfortunately, she's potentially facing a death in her family, and so she had to leave unexpectedly. So, but I wanted to just thank all of y'all for this wonderful conversation. I hope that we will continue this, not just the conversation, but actually what the next step is. And so with that, I will close this out. Please feel free to take whatever and any food that you see out there. I also want to, again, did you say?
flowers.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I just want to, once again, because this is something that I think we all just need to recognize. What Tameka was talking about is, meeting people where they are, what do they need? The fact that they had the thought and consideration to bring flowers for people here, not only with the food, but we also recognize we have people that are watching children, childcare, because we know that that can also be a barrier for people. And it was actually warmed my heart to see the kids in there in the center. So thank you for that support. Thank you for being here. Please take the flowers. I know I already picked mine out and I got some. And so take some more if you can. But also just continue to be engaged with us and uplift and help us and push us, push the American Bar Association and all of us to to continue to do this work. So I look forward for the continued engagement, and with that, thank you again.